This is Rob Tubber for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. Been a long time, but I'm delighted to be joined today by Ben Davison. We're at the MTK Global Performance Centre here down in Harlow. How are you, Ben?
All good, thanks, Rob. You?
Very well, thanks, mate. Very well. Thanks for having me down here today. This is some place.
Yeah, when it's all done, it will be, but early stages, got a few bits to sort out before we can get up and running, but looking forward to the road ahead with it all.
A work in progress. Almost makes me want to get my workout gear on myself, Ben.
Yeah, well, it looks like it's been a while.
Cheers, mate. How are you? Been a while since I saw you. I think the last time I saw you, you were talking off camera. I think I came and interviewed you right before lockdown. I think the week before lockdown at your mum's house. How have you been, good sir?
Yeah, I've been good. Just working away, keeping myself busy as everybody else was trying to do through the lockdown. And as soon as possible, as soon as the rules allowed us, straight back to work with the lads. Went over to Fuerteventura first of all, and then came back here. And before we know it, it's fight week for Josh Taylor.
It certainly is fight week for Josh Taylor, and let's talk straight about that. Obviously, Josh, somebody I know very well. Obviously, I know you very well. What's it been like? Obviously, you've had the extra time now. You've had the lockdown. You've been over to Fuerteventura. It must have been a blessing to have that at the start of a new relationship.
Yeah, well, he come over to Dubai and we had our first week in Dubai. Then he rejoined us when we was in Manchester. Then it seemed that that the Saunders-Canelo fight was going to happen, so we headed over to Vegas. Then the coronavirus thing sort of happened. We came back, all in a group WhatsApp and that. Stayed in touch, and as I say, as soon as possible when the rules allowed us, we went over to the Canary Islands, got some training in, and it was enjoyable. It was good, you know. It's been a while since he's got out and really had his teeth into it, and been in a position where it's fight week, so I think he's excited for it. I think he's looking forward to it, and It's been a good progress, some good progression in many different areas. Not trying to overload him with information, but yeah, looking forward to Saturday.
Let's just talk about that. You mentioned not wanting to overload him with information. It seems like more often than not, at least when a trainer takes a new fighter on, they inevitably kind of say, you know, I don't need to change too much. He's already an elite fighter. He's already a great fighter. You've inherited an unbeaten, unified world champion. I'm guessing that while you obviously want to put your own imprint on him as a coach and work on things that you'd like to work on, there is an element of that, is there?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's putting my own imprint on him, because that'd be a little bit of an ego thing. Like, I need to show, you know, it's just what I see where Josh needs to work on. And each fight at world level is a different fight, you know. A Barancek style to KHONGSONG, for example, completely different style. Pro grade to Barancek, different style. Pro grade to Postel, completely different style. So you have to go about the fight in different ways. And you have to have layers to your game. Josh has got an excellent toolbox. It's just knowing when, what, how and why to use those tools that he's got. And that's really the area that we've focused on, is when to use certain tools in his arsenal.
WHYTE-POVETKIN went on a podcast yesterday, and they mentioned the fight with Josh, and kind of, I think, generally speaking, this is boxing fans, but forgive me, but this can certainly be British boxing fans sometimes. If you don't know a fighter, if they come from a Thailand, as an WHYTE-POVETKIN does, or somewhere around there, that they maybe haven't seen as much of them as other fighters based in Europe or America, etc., and then they kind of underrate them. How good is WHYTE-POVETKIN from the eye that you've been casting over him for the last 6 months?
Yeah, he's a good fighter. I'd say he's got elite level power. I wouldn't say he's got elite level intelligence, or elite level experience. But he's certainly a dangerous fighter because he's got elite level power. Coming from Thailand, he's probably extremely experienced in terms of fighting. So he's probably got a fantastic elite level mindset. And of course, with the situation, he's not walking into the Lions Den, you know, of 20,000 mad Scotsmen screaming at him. So, you know, there's a few things there to be aware of. And as I say, we are certainly aware of. So, you know, it's about how we go about the fight. It's a difficult one because no matter what, there's not going to be much credit for Josh in this fight because If he goes and blows Khonsong away, he's blown away and unknown. If he goes and has a hard fight and comes out with a win, then, it's not been a great performance. Whereas I think that a smart, intelligent performance against Khonsong and a good win, it's a tricky fight, I think is a good performance in itself. So, yeah, it's an interesting one.
You mentioned Josh not getting the credit for a win, or people not knowing happened on Khonsong. Does that happen for you as well? Is that the same for you? Obviously, again, Josh Taylor, it's your first fight together. He's coming off the back of a career-defining win against Regis Prograis. Shane McGuigan and Josh Taylor both have spoke openly about the training relationship between them. Obviously, the reasons that Josh left weren't necessarily to do with that. Are you kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't in this situation? Is it kind of a case of, for you, that there's not really I guess what I'm trying to say, are you in a no-win situation?
To a certain degree, I understand what you're saying, but it was the same situation with Tyson. No matter what, there's going to be that element of, when a fight is achieved before you're working with them. But also, when you're in the spotlight, there's always going to be naysayers and this and that, and the focus isn't really, Josh coming out with a win, the credit is not mine, the credit is Josh Taylor's, and he's the one that gets in there, he's the one that does the job. It's just my job to give him the guide and the plan on the best way to do so. So, when Josh comes out victorious on Saturday, the praise is all his.
Without obviously over-divulging your game plan or giving away too much information, what sort of things have you been working on for Josh? As you mentioned, Lappin and Khonsong and Regis Prograis really are worlds apart in style. What are we expecting to see from Josh going into this fight?
Well, we've seen a lot with Josh, elite level tenacity, elite level conditioning, elite level intensity, all these kinds of things. But in this fight, we need to see elite level intelligence. And that's not saying that Josh Taylor not being what we know Josh Taylor for, it's just when. As I said before, it's about when, what, how, and why. And he's picking his moments. As I said, he's fully aware of Khonsong's strengths and weaknesses, and that's for him to exploit. Obviously,
Josh is not overlooking this fight. Everybody's talking about the Jose Ramirez undisputed fight. Let's go back a few weeks. Victor Postol against Jose Ramirez. I know you would have watched the fight. What did you make of Jose Ramirez's performance?
Styles make fights, and I always thought that style was a tough fight for Ramirez. So the fact that he come out with a win, for me, is a good performance, Postol's a top fighter. So I think it's a bit harsh the way people have sort of played it down a little bit. I think Ramirez is a top quality fighter, but I just think stylistically for Josh, it's a good matchup.
Going back to Josh, obviously a couple of weeks ago, or last week, kind of losing track of time in 2020, you went down to have a look at kind of lockdown boxing, really, and stepped into the bubble and watched Fight Night. What was it like for you? Obviously, you mentioned the fact that there's not going to be 20,000 screaming Scots there on Saturday night. Josh said to me earlier he doesn't care. What's it going to be like for you working in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I certainly took away from going to the event was that as soon as a fight that sort of grabbed your interest took off, you completely forgot about your surroundings. And it's how it is in a fight anyway, I'm usually very cool, calm and collected in a corner. So I don't really get emotionally carried away. So I just think I'll be able to be the same whether there is or whether there isn't. But it was certainly interesting. At the very beginning I was a bit, but as I said, once things got going it just became the norm.
Going back to Jose Ramirez, obviously myself included, being a boxing fan, looking forward to that undisputed 140-pound fight between him and Josh Taylor. Jack Cattrell, in the last kind of month or so, in the last 6 weeks, obviously he's been mandatory for a long time, but it looks as though the WBO are keen to enforce. That's okay. Keen to enforce the mandatory. Not coronavirus. And we are 2 meters apart, which is why I'm leaning forward so significantly and almost falling over. But anyway, Jack Cattrell, a threat to Jose Ramirez in your opinion?
Jack Cattrell's a really good fighter. At world level, everybody he's earned his shot. Mandatory defence, he's earned his shot. They're all a threat. There is no easy fights at world title contention, and that's why you see so many fighters win a world title but struggle to keep defending it. Because everybody's got to be treated. You've got to have that challenger mindset, because every fighter's coming and having that one night is what they've dreamed of for 10, 15, 20 years. So there is no easy fights at world level. So of course he's a threat for sure.
Just touch upon what you've said there. It's something that we've spoken about before on numerous occasions. Kind of fighters who have started boxing when they're 6 or whatever, for example. It's always about getting to the world title. Once you get the world title, then what do you do? Josh Taylor has always talked to me about becoming undisputed champion, boxing at Edinburgh Castle and setting these new goals out for him. Is that good coming into this fight, that obviously he's now with a new team, he's now with yourself? That gives him that little bit of extra impetus to stay on that road?
That's something that I'm really, really impressed with Josh. He's constantly setting himself new goals. I want to be undisputed. Become world champion, want to be unified. Now wants to be undisputed. Then wants to be a multi-weight world champion. And having that... And it's not something he just throws up in the air. He believes it. He believes in himself and believes that he can achieve it. And that's a massive, massive asset to have. So something that I'm very impressed with Josh, and something that's very important if you want to remain at the top.
Now, somebody I know that you know well from our various jaunts stateside, Mr. Andre Ward had some interesting things to say about Josh Taylor. I know you have a lot of respect for Andre Ward and certainly wouldn't kind of base your whole opinion on him from one kind of out of context comment, but words to the effect of Josh Taylor's not an inside fighter. Josh Taylor can't fight on the inside. No, you would have heard it. What are your thoughts on those comments?
Well, there's lots of different areas to fighting on the inside. As you said, I've got great respect for Andre Ward, and I like to think that I've got a good enough relationship with him. So, a phenomenal boxing mind, and it's a conversation I'd like to have with him. He might see something or have an idea of where Josh lacks something inside. We know that Josh has phenomenal variety, lands a huge percentage of his shots at mid to short range. But there might be, a certain area of the inside fighting that Ward sees and thinks, well, that could develop work, or that might need a bit of work in the Ramirez fight. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to have the conversation with him, but certainly, I don't think Ward would just throw a comment out there without thinking about it. So maybe he sees something, and hopefully at some point we get to have a conversation about it.
Well, next time we're out in America, we'll try and make it happen here, live and exclusive on Boxing Social. We'll see. A couple of fights I want to touch on. I mentioned Ivan Baranchyk, fighter who I know that you rate very highly. Jose Zepeda fighting Ivan Baranchyk. Great fight. Probably one of the fights that I'm most looking forward to.
Brilliant fight. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's a real interesting fight. I know that Zepeda done a real good job with Ramirez. I think he feels that he won that fight. So, yes, I think a lot of people felt that he actually won that fight, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I think stylistically as well, it's a good matchup for Zepeda. So, but we know that Barancyk's a right little terrier and a strong little bull. So yeah, it should make for a good fight, and one I'm looking forward to.
And before we touch upon the rest of your growing stable, it seems like every time I talk to you, you've had another addition to the camp. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about somebody who I know that you rate very, very highly, who boxed this past weekend, Jaron Ennis. Continued his unbeaten start, really starting to make some noise now at 147 pounds.
I've said about him for a long time, Jaron Ennis. Quality fighter. Best prospect in boxing, in my opinion, and I've said that for a couple of years now. The only thing for me is I don't want them holding him back for too long. I'm saying I don't want him like I'm in charge, but I wouldn't like to see him held back for too long, because he can start to get a little bit too comfortable, because his ability is world level. He just needs the right fights at the right time for the right experience. Something like a Samuel Vargas, a Chris Algieri. A fight like that, I think will be the right fight for Jaron Ennis next, because he's just having his way in every single moment of every fight at the moment. And he very well could do so at world level as well. He's extremely talented, very well rounded. Looks like he's got a great work ethic, and I'm a big fan of his.
Well, there we go. That's quite a ringing endorsement from yourself. Just like to echo those things. You were actually probably one of the first people I spoke to about Boots Ennis a number of years ago. I remember you putting me on to him. And yeah, very, very talented young fighter. We look forward to seeing how he progresses at 147 pounds. I think him and Virgil Ortiz in the future is a potential real big fight. While I'm here, I might as well ask you about that fight. Virgil Ortiz versus Boots Ennis, 147 pounds, Cinco de Mayo 2021. Who wins? Probably be 2022.
In all honesty, in 2022. So we're talking down the road a little bit. Depends on development, like I say. We know that Virgil Ortiz. Look, I don't know why Ennis's opposition hasn't been stepped up yet. Is it that they don't feel like he's ready? Because I certainly feel like he's more than ready. Is it the promoters don't want to pay the money? Maybe that's not true. I don't know. Maybe something to do with the broadcasters. I don't know. Virgil Ortiz, we know that he boxed Samuel Vargas last time out. I think that's the right fight to see for Jaron Ennis. I'm not being biased because I've got nothing to be biased for, but I just think that with the right fights over that period of time that you're talking about there, for me, Jaron Ennis is the one that I look at and says has the most potential. But of course, as I say, I think it's important that he gets the right fights at this point. So with the right fights and that in that period of time, I fancy Jaron Ennis to be making real big waves in the welterweight division in boxing altogether, to be honest.
Fight I'd like to get your opinion on: Jamal Charlo versus Sergey Derevyanchenko. Well, it seems like it's all creeping up on everybody now. We've got this really top heavy end to the year, which I'm certainly not complaining about. But how do you see that fight going?
It's a good fight. I know Derevyanchenko's coming in off a loss, but I think he's coming off with the momentum because it was a good performance against Golovkin. And I think that fight and the Danny Jacobs fight could potentially stand him in good stead to... although he's had less fights, I think that experience in with that quality may see him through and may be the difference in this fight. But I just think, stylistically as well, I think it'll be a good fight. And I fancy the fight that I see the two styles coming into, I just fancy that experience and that momentum that Derevyanchenko's coming in off being the difference.
You mentioned Golovkin as a potential opponent for Billy Joe Saunders. Obviously boxed Sergey Derevyanchenko last time. I think it's fair to say that we're starting to see some quite clear and obvious signs of slippage now from Gennady Golovkin. Would you agree with that? Is he the same fighter who boxed Matthew Macklin and Martin Murray?
You're basing that off of the Derevyanchenko performance?
Me personally, no. I think there's been a gradual decline in Golovkin, but I think it's been a marked decline in the Derevyanchenko fight. That's my opinion. I'm just wondering what yours is.
It's a difficult one because I know the rumour was, he wasn't well. He's had a change of coach. The Steve Rose performance wasn't fantastic. But when you've been at that top level and that the opposition just drops that little bit, that extra little bit of butterflies, nerves, sharpness, edginess, that extra little bit that gives you the extra little bit of, not going to say fear. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's not there, and it shows. It shows. So it'll be interesting to see him up against a top elite fighter and see how he. Again, I think he's got that Cezaremata, or I'm not sure how you say his name. The Polish Ceremeta or something. He's a mandatory European champion. Yeah, Again, I don't think that's a fight that's going to get the juices flowing for Golovkin. But what's next for him may. So, yeah, interesting to see. You'd imagine so, taking into consideration the amount of fights he's had, the type of fights he's had, his age, changing trainer. But, you never know. It'd be an interesting one. Can't say. And if you used to fight him, you definitely couldn't be going, look, we're not fighting the same man. You have to prepare for the same man. 'Cause if the same man turns up and the old dog's got one more big fight in him, then he's no easy fight, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the kind of saying that goes along with boxing is like always great for one night. You can still pull it back for that one night if you've been as great as he has throughout his career, which he has, of course. Moving on, Lee McGregor. Really good to see Lee today. Obviously, I've known Lee for a long time from his time with Shane McGuigan. Great to see him in the camp. Talk to us a little bit about that. I know that you've spoken with Lee over probably a number of months, or you certainly have a relationship. What's it like having him in the gym, and how did it come about?
Great lad, Lee. He come over and spent a week with me last year, but Tyson was there, Billy Joe was there, Isaac was there, and I was travelling back and forth, and I'd said to him, I can't nail myself down somewhere at the moment, but of course I can help out for a week, 10 days, whatever it was. So Lee come over, top lad, really nice lad, good learner, good manners, really like him. And then he come over to Fort Ventura. When we went over to Fort Ventura, Josh come over, Terry McCormack come over, and Lee McGregor come over. Spent a week there. He was telling me about the way he'd struggled to make weight. I said, I can put you onto somebody. Put him onto Dave Stash, top nutritionist, and he was just like, Ben, I can't believe it. Like, from what I was doing to how I've done this is night and day. And just a natural progression of him to make his way over here. Now we've got the gym here and that. So, yeah, he had his first week last week. Really enjoyed it. As I say, good learner, and it's good to have him in the gym.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because he's one of the bigger bantamweights that I've seen, that I've come across. And obviously he came back at super bantamweight, and there was kind of some talk about where his weight would eventually lie. I think we can both agree that it will eventually go quite significantly north of where he is now. But bantamweight now, so obviously you've got the S&C on board, no concerns about that. Obviously going into a tough fight against Karim Gurfi.
Karim Gurfi's a good fighter. It is a tough fight, and I think, I know he'd struggled to make weight, and I haven't watched the full fight back with him and Cash Farouk. But that tough 12 rounds will stand him in good stead going into this fight. So, yeah, and so from a week already, a couple of little changes, a couple of adjustments, explaining a few things to him. He picks things up very quickly. So I think you'll see a big improvement in Lee, and see a good performance from him for the European title as well.
Obviously, Lee is now fighting for the European title. He's made no secret of his desire to get on with things throughout his professional career. Reminds me of a certain Josh Taylor. Obviously, Josh was kind of the cycle before him in the amateurs. Lee does have that kind of admiration for Josh, much the same as Josh had for your Ricky Burns's and people like that. Is it going to be part of your role to kind of course it's part of your role to kind of taper those, not expectations for him, but just make sure he takes the right fights at the right times?
Partly mine, but it's my job to communicate with MTK and discuss about how his development's going and where we see him being ready, and physically and mentally, emotionally, technically, tactically. So, yeah, partly with MTK as well. They've done it numerous times now, so they know where he's at, and I've got a great relationship with them. So, yes, it shouldn't be a job too difficult.
And certainly, obviously, I've kind of posed that question as it's some sort of negative. It's not a negative, but obviously can be. But it's still good to have that in you that you want to achieve so much so quickly. Yeah,
100%. And what a role model to a certain degree to have in someone like Josh Taylor.
Absolutely, I agree. First time I've ever met Shabazz Masoud today. The first time ever, live in the flesh, live and direct. Everybody I speak to about him is either the Maverick, indeed. Everybody I speak to about him tells me about how skilled and talented and what a great fighter he is. Also seems to be a really nice kid as well, which is great. Talk to me a little bit about his development.
Yeah, exactly that. He's a real well-mannered lad, and a top quality fighter. Fantastic skills. Again, these lads are here because they've got a bundle of talent. So lots of tools in their arsenal. It's just knowing when, what, how and why to use those tools, sharpen those tools, and may add a few more ingredients into the toolbox. So, again, a good learner, real hungry learner. God, he drives me mad, and I'm mad for it. So Ben, what about this? Ben, what about that? What do you think about this? Did you watch this? Did you watch that? But it's great to have that, you know. Straight away, obviously, we spoke about Jaron Ennis, and I've mentioned him to Shabazz straight away. Coming Monday morning. Did you watch it? I watched it. I watched the full fight. You know, it's good to have a lad like that as well, you know. So yeah, really looking forward to his potential. His long term for him and the potential he's got. See him doing big things.
What's the plan for him next? Randomly, a couple of days ago, I got a load of direct messages from Michael Ramirez. Well, obviously, he's mandatory for Ramirez's English title. Is that the fight that we could expect to see him in sometime soon?
Yeah, that's the fight that we're looking for. That's the fight that, as you say, Shabazz is mandatory for. Just waiting for a date from Frank Warren and BT Sport, who Shabazz is signed with. So as soon as we get that date, then that's what will be coming up for Shabazz.
Good kid, Michael Ramirez. Underrated fighter who's sort of gone under the radar a little bit, and certainly no small test for Shabazz at this stage of his career.
That's right. Obviously, his record's not the best, but coming into it as late, I think that. Well, not I think that I know he has, because I can see it that he's really, really stepped up a level. His intelligence, his demeanour, his poise. He's a lot smarter fighter now than he was before. And I think he may have a little bit more hunger than maybe he did before. You know, his last 3 fights, he's blown away 3 prospects that were supposed to be able to go on and do something. So it's no easy fight, that's for sure.
Okay, well, seeing as it's the first time I've seen you in a while, I'm going to bend your ear on a few non-Ben Davison related things. You know this part's coming. It always comes at the end of every interview. Dillian Whyte versus Alexander Povetkin. Shocking knockout win for Alexander Povetkin. What did you make of the performance?
I thought that he was boxing well, Dillian, but it was one of them. I was asked numerous times before it, and I did say that if the pair of them start hooking with a hooker is 2 hookers, so it becomes 50-50 in my opinion. And, you know, I heard Dave Caldwell in the corner say to him, don't keep giving him that left hook to the body. And that's what it sort of resulted to, you know. I think Dillian's got a bit of not a problem, but a technical error where he sort of tucks up in his shell and head straight down as opposed to takes his head off the line. And I think, you know, that's the reason why he's been hit with a few uppercuts against the likes of Rivas, Joshua, Povetkin, and then what did Josie Parker drop him with? I can't remember. So, you know, but I also got to say, huge respect for the way that he's taking it, like a true man. Took it on the chin, straight back to work, looking to put it right. Massive, massive respect for that. So, yeah, I hope that he comes through it in the rematch. You know, I think he's learnt from his mistake. In the heavyweight division, it's a difficult one because if you get your man hurt, there's a time and a place. It's very difficult to know, is it the right time to put your foot on the gas, because there's always a risk, but in the heavyweight division, there is always that risk, as we always say, as in any division, but especially the heavyweight division. So it was a difficult one. They've both shared a few rounds of each other now, so it'd be interesting to see how the first few rounds play out in that rematch.
Now, obviously, somebody that you know fairly well, Mark Tibbs, kind of went into that fight. Was initially the trainer, kind of back end of last year. That's since changed with Xavier Miller. There was, obviously, you mentioned that you felt that Dillian Whyte boxed well in those first 4 rounds. What notable changes, if any, did you see from kind of the Mark Tibbs version to the Xavier Miller version of Dillian Whyte?
I wouldn't say I saw huge changes. What I noticed, whether it's, you know, I can't say it's got anything to do with anybody other than Dillian Whyte himself, to be honest with you, was that he just looked like, you know, he took himself away and had his mind on his job and was really focused, and that's a great thing to see for any fighter. So he's got straight back to it and doing the same again. So he'll know what he needs to do when he's in there. In terms of the relationship between Mark and Dillian, you know, I've got no idea on that. I felt like in the corner he was giving some decent advice. As I say, Dave Caldwell said that I don't know Xavier, so I can't comment on that either. It's very easy to go and point the finger, or people make these assumptions and whatnot, but I'm sure that him and Mark had discussed the fight before before he went into the fight and spoke about the best way to go about it as well. So it's just one of them, wasn't it? You know, he dropped him a couple of times, was doing well, didn't really look under huge threat, looked comfortable and got hit with a shot, took his eye off the ball for a second and that happened. But it's heavyweight boxing, that can happen. And like I say, I'm just interested to see how the rematch goes in the first few rounds.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was coming on to, really. The reason why I asked that is obviously now he's going into an immediate rematch, and it is a very immediate rematch with a new coach as well. And obviously you're kind of on the back of you're 0-1 with a new coach. I potentially would think that you maybe want to remove yourself and maybe work on certain things or give yourself a little bit of a time. What do you make of the turnaround in between the first and second fights, considering the brutal knockout?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to think that Dillion's had the right team around him as opposed to the right checks, the right scans, the right doctors to give him the advice whether it's too early, not too early, the right time and whatnot. I'm not a doctor, so I can't give him that advice on a science level, you know, on what's right and what's wrong. But you'd like to think that he's had all that done to make sure that he'll be 100% on the night. So, yeah.
Do you think he comes through the rematch?
Yes, I do. I think he needs to make sure he knocks any confidence out of Dillian, out of Alexander Povetkin early and doesn't let him get into a flow and start dictating the fight from the first round out of What I mean is Povetkin keep giving him that threat, and then Dillian Whyte being reactive as opposed to proactive. So I think that Dillian Whyte needs to start fast, not hook him with a hooker obviously, but start fast and put the have Povetkin reacting to what he's doing and let him know that he's the boss in there again and sort of get back to how he started off the last fight. But I think he'll be able to do that, and I think he'll come through. Fingers crossed.
Okay, well,
not for any reason that like I want to see a fight afterwards, but it's rare that you see a fighter go about a loss of that magnitude in the way that Dillian Whyte has. And although he's said things and done things that I might not have agreed with, or he's slagged me off before, but you know what sort of character he is. He is how he is. Whenever I've seen him, he's got on fine, and I just massively respect the way that he's gone about it. Like I say, it's very rare that you see someone just take it on the chin and get back to it. And so for that, I'd like to see him be victorious.
Okay, well, before I let you go, it wouldn't be right not to speak of the biggest pay-per-view event to end 2020. I am, of course, talking about Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul, which is the rumoured exhibition. It seems like 2020 just has its own way of making things a little bit more crazy and crazy. Mayweather versus Logan Paul exhibition. Does that whet your appetite, Ben?
No, please don't ever ask me that question again. Seriously. Do you know what? I always use Mayweather as an example to the lads and that, and what a career he's had. Please don't do that. Please. Let's not talk about it. Seriously. It's a disgrace, especially what boxing's gone through this year. Please.
But it looks like it might well happen.
I can't even think about it, to be honest. I can't. It's shocking. And it's not good for pay-per-view, in my opinion. I may be wrong and I'm not an expert on it, but I don't think it's very good for the pay-per-view market in America.
So it's safe to say that you won't be buying it.
Well, listen. I don't think it will, but God willing it don't.
Okay. All right, Ben. Well, always a pleasure catching up with you. I thought it was the first time this year that we've spoken, but I did remember that other interview that we did right at the very start of lockdown. But nice to see you looking so well. You're looking slimmer than I've seen you in some instances in the past. So congratulations on that. I'm not, but that's why I'm this side of the camera, not that. Always a pleasure catching up with you. I wish you all the best in your first bout with unified champion Josh Taylor this weekend at York Hall. As always, thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social, Ben Davison.
Thanks, Rob.